Good morning. Welcome to my thought for the day. I hope your Palm Sunday was celebrated as beautifully as it was in the fellowship that I belong to at Monk's Yard, and something of the excitement of the coming of the King into his capital city was part of our worship yesterday. It was lovely. But I'm going to take the verse that follows immediately on after John's account of what's called the triumphal entry, the riding into Jerusalem on that donkey. It's in John 12, verse 20. And it says here, "Now among those who went up to worship at the feast," that was the Passover feast, of course, "were some Greeks. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and said to him, 'Sir, we wish to see Jesus.' Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew went with Philip, and they told Jesus. And Jesus answered them, 'The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified.'" Now that is a strange little incident. Jesus has arrived in Jerusalem, and presumably he's got off the donkey. The donkey's been returned. All the crowd have dispersed. And there are people who've come for the celebration who are Greeks. Presumably they're Greeks who have heard about the Jewish faith, and they may have been what were termed proselytes, but they were interested enough to come to Jerusalem. And they'd obviously heard about Jesus, perhaps from those who were there, or perhaps they saw him coming in to the city, and they wondered who he was, and they wanted to meet him. "Sirs, we would see Jesus." They said to Philip, "Sir, we would see Jesus." That's a lovely phrase. Oh, if only everyone had that kind of curiosity. We'd like to know more about. Tell us about Jesus. We want to know about Jesus. We want to see him. Want to meet him. And this little Chinese whisper. Let's hope it wasn't a Chinese whisper. I think it was very genuine. It only went through three people. It went from the Greeks to Philip, from Philip to Andrew, and then Andrew and Philip together went to see Jesus. And his response was, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Now I think that's because Jesus remembered prophecies in the Old Testament about the Gentiles coming to the brightness of his dawning. Indeed, if you think about the wonderful Song of Simeon, as it's called in Luke 2, verses 29 onwards, he says, verse 30, "For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and for glory to my people Israel." Simeon knew that the ministry of Jesus was not going to be just to Israel, that the Gentiles were going to come to his light. John, of course, describes Jesus as the light. In him was life, and his life was the light of men. That's the beginning of John, isn't it? But if we go back into the Old Testament, in Isaiah 42:6 and Isaiah 49:6, it says, "I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes of the blind," and so on. And in 49:6, "I will give you as a light to the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth." There's a promise in the Old Testament of the light of Jesus reaching the Gentiles, the nations, the non-Jews. And Jesus, a little bit later on in that chapter 12 of John, says, "He who believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me." That's in verse 44. "And he who sees me sees him who sent me. I have come as light into the world, that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. I do not come to judge the world, but to save the world." He talks of the world. He begins to talk about his salvation being for everybody. For God so loved the world. not just for the Jewish people. But I think that visit of the Gentiles, that inquiry of the Gentiles, was very significant to Jesus, because he reacted to it and said, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." In his giving of himself, and in the fact that knowledge of him was beginning to spread outside the Jewish nation, and there were non-Jews coming to find out about him. Spoke to him. I'm sure Mary told him about the Nunc Dimittis, about that wonderful song of Simeon that we all know so well. That he was to be a light to lighten the Gentiles and to be the glory of his people Israel. Jesus is the light. He's the light who came for you and me. And in him there is no distinction any longer between the Jews and the Greeks, between God's people and everyone else. Jesus is Lord of all. They're not mentioned again, these Greeks. They probably stayed in Jerusalem for the Passover feast. They may have witnessed the crucifixion. They may have come to faith. I don't know. You know, the scriptures contain so many incidents that give me questions I want to ask. I want to know the answer to when we get to glory. Did these Greeks become the first Gentile believers? I don't know. But ponder on the fulfillment of even the smallest details of the Old Testament prophecies, that Jesus would come as a light to the Gentiles. Thank the good Lord that he put his light into your life and my life, that he sent Jesus for not just the Jews, that we can't be saved just by association. We are saved because Jesus died for us. That's enough from me this morning. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.